Birdhouse in Sherwood Park. It's 9718 Orange Road. You can also get a hold of us at 780-416-4435 or on our website, www.mikasbirdhouse.com.
Hi, I'm Janine and this is Ian and we're the owners of Mika's Birdhouse.
Well, this is great. This is the first week of December. And look at this weather. This is amazing.
Like March.
This is really, really interesting to have this mild weather at this time of year. I mean, it's maybe climate change. But we're looking at 1/4 section just south of Cross Lake. And this is one of the few areas still left where you have mature forests. Most of the areas around here have been logged, heavily logged, and because you've got cattle ranchers in this country. And so this is an island. It's kind of a mature, old-growth forest that's still there. Okay, this is the 8th of December, and normally this time of year it'd be a lot colder, and usually we have a lot more snow, but there's enough snow here to do a lot of snow tracking of animals in the snow. They leave a sign behind, and then if you know how to identify them, you obviously know what animals have passed through here. Oh, there's a woodpecker calling. This is a trail camera, and the trail cameras are used a great deal these days to get pictures of animals. You just put the summer out on the trail, and anything that walks by, you get a picture of it. Now that's the modern way of finding out what there is, but the more traditional way, mostly for trappers, especially for trappers, is to check for sign in the snow or in the mud. In this case, of course, we have snow. And the setting that we're at is a 1/4 section of land, about 40 kilometers north of Westlock. And the interesting thing about this land is that it actually had been homesteaded in the 1930s, but then with some limited logging here and there, it actually retained its natural vegetation. And in the background behind me is a very good example of a forest that has matured over time, and you'll see different layers of trees. There are the first layer, the lighter colored, are the aspen, and then just to the left of that there's a clump of larch, and the larch are sort of more yellowish in color because this is in the wintertime. And behind that, you will see a very narrow strip of light green, and that's actually jack pine. And beyond the jack pine, you'll see a darker layer of green, and that's the spruce trees. And so you see these different layers creating diversity. Beyond that, at the very top level, is a light layer again of aspen. And all of these different layers really make up an interesting, diverse system. And also, within the aspen, both at the first layer and the second layer, are actually another different species of aspen, namely balsam poplar. And these balsam poplar are very popular for ruffed grouse in the wintertime. In fact, that's the main source of food for them. They feed on the buds. So we're going to go and look at different tracks. Interesting set of tracks crossing the trail right next to a very tiny little track. These are deer mice, and right here is a track of a ermine, which is a mid-sized weasel. This time of year they're snow white with black tip on the tails, and this guy is obviously hunting the deer mice and also red-tailed voles, which are underneath the snow, and actually the ermine will go underneath there and catch them in that interface between the soil and the snow. There's a little bit of a space, and that's where the weasels do most of their hunting in the wintertime. There's not much snow here. It's the first week of December, but enough in the forested areas to be able to do some tracking. Here is a lynx that has just moved through an area where there are a lot of rabbits. And he's going from one rabbit patch to another. Actually, these are not really rabbits, they're hares, they're snowshoe hares. And the tracks are roundish, and they're separated about 18 inches or so apart. And that's how you can tell a lynx track from certainly a deer track is much different. A deer are much further apart, and you'll see the dragging of the hooves on deer, whereas this definitely is a lynx. Interesting, this is actually a track of a fisher. The fisher used to be quite rare in this area, but they've made a comeback in the last 10 years or so. And they are a weasel, a very large, dark-colored weasel in the weasel family. And of course, they don't turn white the way the smaller weasels do. This one here is actually hunting probably snowshoe hare in this area. They're also very much a predator on porcupine. There used to be a lot of porcupine in here, and since the fisher have come back into this system, all of the porcupine have disappeared. We just have not seen any in the last few years. Well, now, we actually have 3 different species here that have left the tracks behind. This is a red squirrel scampering across, only once. He didn't come back and forth. Sometimes I have a solid trail coming back and forth. Right next to it, you have a white-footed mouse. Usually they spend most of the time underneath the snow, but this guy decided to come out above the snow. Sometimes in deep snow, they have tunnels going through the snow, and that's for the CO2 to provide air going into the snow space below. And right next to that, we have a ermine track. That's a weasel. You can see the 2 feet in the front and 2 feet in the back, slightly staggered, and they jump going through the snow and also going underneath quite often. They are insatiable predators. They have to kill all the time in order to maintain their metabolism. They've got a very high rate of metabolism, very active, and are in need of food constantly that they have to do their hunting. Want me to? This is a trail of snowshoe hare. Snowshoe hare are very common in the boreal forest. And you can see where they're hopping along here. And in these trails, they will leave a lot of trenches behind that sort of indicates where their main path is. And what has happened in the past, the trappers would put in snares at a place like this, and you can snare these snowshoe hare. They're also called rabbits, but they're snowshoe hare. And you can trap them or sort of by catching them in a snare. And that's been used for sustenance by trappers in the wintertime. You can also see right here where the snowshoe hare have been feeding along this branch. This is a wind-blown aspen, and the freshly wind-blown aspen are the ones that the snowshoe hare will be feeding on. This is a branch of an aspen tree that had broken off quite recently. It's still very fresh. And the rabbits, or the snowshoe hare, have found this, and you can see they've been eating on the branches on the bark. They've been actually rodents, and so they're lagomorphs, which is really a plant-eating species. And they've been chewing away at the bark. You can see how they've been taking off the bark and nourishment. Here, bits and pieces right here. They kind of eat some of the ends. They actually eat the whole twig. But in this case, also, of course, they've been nibbling away at the bark. And that's very good, nutritious food that they really live on. And over here, you can see the droppings there. The little round pellets. Those are snowshoe hare droppings. Very important species in the boreal forest is the basis of the food chain for many, many mammalian and avian predators. There are a lot of species that depend on snowshoe hare, so that in fact they are at the basis of a food chain of many different species. When the settlers first came and homesteaded on this quarter section and the area around it, they came in from St. Albert by horse-drawn wagons. They had a trail through here, and it went on to Fawcett and then off to Flatbush. But what was interesting is that the settlers, when they first came here, encountered only the presence of mule deer. There are two species in Alberta, mule deer and whitetail deer. The mule deer are very common. In fact, many of them lived on mule deer because they were so common. Also, sharp-tailed grouse, which were very common in those days, and blueberries, because they burned the areas off and there were a lot of blueberries. That was the main source of food for them. Now, we don't have any sharp-tailed grouse to speak of, very little blueberries, and the white-tailed deer have displaced the mule deer. There's many, many more white-tailed deer in the area. You only see a very few mule deer every once in a while. Most often you'll see them at Cross Lake Provincial Park. You'll still have a small herd of mule deer in that area. But on this road here, you'll see the tracks right in front of me of a young white-tailed deer. The bucks, the bigger deer, the mature males have much larger tracks. But in the woods here, there are trails and tracks of white-tailed deer everywhere. It's a very, very common species of ungulate. On this property, we also have a lot of moose and elk. Now, the elk move around a great deal. They don't stay in one area very long. And if you go look over into the woods right here, to my right, you'll see a trail. That trail is made by white-tailed deer. They make these very extensive trails through the forest. On this quarter section, there are a lot of moose. And behind me is an area where they like to browse in the wintertime. There's lots of willows in there. Pretty heavy, dense bush with lots of willows. They're in there a great deal. And in the wintertime, when they browse, they don't graze, they browse on the bush. They'll sort of take the new growth and the buds, which is very highly nutritious. That's where they get their sustenance, their food value from that. And then they also will browse in upland areas, in areas where there are a lot of hazel. And off to my right, in the hillside here, you'll see an area where there's some hazel in there. They will browse there quite extensively in these hillsides on this particular property. And then in front of me, you can see the evidence of the moose having been here. And there's some droppings. In the wintertime, the moose droppings are compact like this. It almost looks like chocolates. You know, you get those almonds that are chocolate covered almonds. That's in the wintertime, they have these pellets like this. And in the summer, it's very different. They will feed on a lot of forbs, leaves, and things like that. So the droppings are very different from what you see in the wintertime. So this is a nice spot because it shows you sort of a variety of areas where the moose really thrive. And we have a large number of moose on this property. And many of them come to lick sites. And I've got a lick site near my cabin, which is on this particular quarter section, where you can see the moose coming to that lick.
Trip to the cabin, and where I'm walking in and Lou's driving in. And guess who's waiting for us? A beautiful moose. Not sure how close we can get before he'll spook off. Lou's trying to get a photograph of him before he moves. See how close he can get. Maybe he's gonna go back in the bush now. galloping right past the cabin. This is the moose track, and you can see by its stride, it's at least 2 of my steps long. And here's the attraction. We have a salt block there.
Moose are the largest in the deer family. What's interesting about moose is that they are very closely tied to aquatic environments, marshes, lakes. In fact, in some areas, especially in eastern Canada, North America, they spend a lot of time in the summer feeding on aquatic vegetation. And just recently, they've taken some photographs of moose feeding underneath the water surface. And they're not very selective in what they feed, but they feed on a lot of the aquatic vegetation and keep their heads down for quite a while and just browse underneath the surface. In the wintertime, they will switch over to feeding to a very large extent on shrubs. Particularly, they like hazel and willows. They'll browse on willows and hazel, so they get quite a change in their food habits. Right now, we have, right on this particular ice surface, where you can see there are numerous tracks of moose crossing right here. And if you look quite closely in amongst the moose tracks, there's also some mouse tracks right in amongst here. Now, these are not very clear imprints because it's been quite warm, and when the moose moved over here, they left their imprint, and as the snow melted and the surface of the ice melted a bit, it kind of made a slushy imprint. So these are actually moose tracks that were made when the snow was quite hard, but then when it got warmer, they kind of become more indistinct imprints of the moose hooves. Now, we've been looking at tracks in the snow. Now we're going to look at some of the results from a camera trap. These are animals that have come to a lick site, and a lick attracts the hoofed mammals, the hoofed mammals being moose, deer, and elk. But because there's so much activity, you also have other critters come to it. And I'm going to show you a sequence of the smaller animals that are attracted to these sites as well. This is a coyote. He's coming along. He's kind of sniffing around, checking things out. And then he kind of moves on and out of the picture. Now we have a smaller canid being dog-like. These are wild dogs, coyotes, and here is a red fox. Comes to the site, comes in from the same angle, sniffs things around, checks it out, and then just moves out of the picture. Now here's the real reason for these licks. This is a bull moose coming into the site. And he's, of course, interested in the minerals that are in the lick site. You can see the reflection of the light as the trail camera flashes. Here's this moose. He's going down. He's taking a lick at the minerals that's in the lick site. And he has enough, and then he moves out, and oh my goodness, look at this. Now we have a snowshoe hare. Also curious. Of course, both the coyote and the fox are after this snowshoe hare. But this little fellow just comes along, is kind of curious, and just moves in and out of the picture quite quickly. Of course, the snowshoe hare are the ones that all the other predators are after, and we did see the tracks in the snow. There he is, and this is the last shot showing you the snowshoe hare.
Mika's Birdhouse in Sherwood Park. It's 9718 Orange Road. You can also get a hold of us at 780-416-4435 or on our website, www.mikasbirdhouse.com.
Hi, I'm Janine and this is Ian and we're the owners of Mika's Birdhouse.